Hierdie is Sê dit soos dit is. Dr. Theo de Jager. Theo, you've been on this show on a number of occasions. And welcome today, once again.
Thank you, and it's always a privilege to be invited by you into the studio.
I just want to remind the person that's listening to this for the first time, you're the executive chairman of the SA Agri Initiative. And your constituency is primarily family farmers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The crusade of my life is that of promoting and protecting the interests of your smaller and medium-sized family farmer.
Now, you know, when you talk smaller and medium-sized farmers, I mean, some of these so-called medium-sized farmers are really substantial farmers.
Oh yes, there are mega farmers amongst them too,
Yeah,
who are still family-owned.
yeah, that's,
And we are very proud of them.
yeah,
But that is a very small minority in numbers.
yeah. To the topic that is under discussion, and the thing that brought you here today specifically is the turmoil that's currently in South Africa. I mean, the Expropriation Act is a very big thing. And while this is under discussion, all of a sudden, President Donald Trump entered the discussion, and he made a remark, and he said terrible things are happening in South Africa.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. They're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
And what is going around is that people say he's acted on misinformation. So let me start off by asking you this, and I'm throwing it open very wide now. Say, are there terrible things happening in South Africa, and what is it? And I'm asking you for that because people say, no, there is no expropriation that's taking place, and there's no land seizures that's taking place at the moment. So what is Trump talking about? So before you answer that, I just want to say this. I've invited other agricultural organizations to be here today. And there will be a lot of questions that I'm going to ask you, which I would have preferred somebody else ask you. So I will ask certain questions on their behalf. So did Trump overreact in your view? Because the blame is now laid in front of the door of many people, perhaps even including you, saying that what Trump is doing is because of all this misinformation. I want you to respond to that.
Yeah, I'm also sorry that I have to sit here alone today. I would really have preferred the other voices of agriculture, some speaking for farmers and some speaking for agribusinesses, who hold an opposite view to mine, to be here. I think it would have been a very interesting debate. And the fact that they are not here actually makes this debate a bit poorer. But yes, I don't think Trump is overreacting. Remember, he's not only reacting to the Expropriation Act, he says that he's reacting to our foreign policy in South Africa. He feels that we have the wrong friends. He's angry with our relationship with Israel and the whole issue at the International Court of Justice. I believe there are a few other issues too, but that has got little to do with us in organized agriculture. What's got directly to do with us are mainly these three things. It is about expropriation without compensation or with nil compensation, the new act that was signed off. And that is a terrible thing. Let there be no doubt about it. And this is where I differ from other agricultural organizations. The signing of this act, signing it into law, is a terrible thing that happened. And there's no justification for it and there's no excuses. But also certain BEE criteria, especially in the family farmer space, which raises questions. And then he also invited Afrikaners to America to gain refugee status. And this is what he said, although this is not what came through in writing. And I have a very specific view on all three of those. And I don't say my view is the only one or the right one. But I feel, and our members feel, that we have an argument which has not been answered on all three of those.
I want to interrupt you on this topic. I want to remind you what the other guys that I wanted around this table today is saying. This is an agri-organization that said disinformation fed Trump, referring to a right-wing Afrikaner lobby group. As far as expropriation is concerned, no land seizures. I just want to focus for now, because the other two is very important. For now, expropriation. There's no land seizures, what he says. There's no confiscations of private property. And there's no expropriation without compensation. So he says, so what's the problem?
Yeah, and if you read further, you'll see that he also says that the misinformation is about those who claim that there are large-scale land grabs.
Land grabs,
Yeah.
and the issue on farmers, and I think we can touch on that as well, yeah.
The interesting part of these media statements is that they don't say who says that there are large-scale land grabs. I have not heard anyone saying that there are large-scale land grabs. Despite of the letter or the inquiry which News 24 have posted to Minister John Steenhuisen, where they say to him that I claimed that there are large-scale land grabs. It's the only instance where I've heard about this. But I never said it. It is simply not true. There are no large-scale land grabs at the moment. And especially not in terms of the new act. But the ink is not yet dry, man. The fact is that this act allows for property to be confiscated or to be expropriated at nil compensation, which for the farmer or the property owner is the same as without compensation. He ends up in the same position. He loses his property without getting paid for it. But it's also not true that there has not been land grabs. Only yesterday, there was an incident in the Eastern Cape. Last week, we had 2 incidences in Seshego, where a wild bunch of people simply squatted on a property saying, actually, we are allowed now by the new act because this property is not being utilized to its fullest potential, and therefore we can do it. Now remember, this is exactly how the Zimbabwean land grab started. Hey, it was not as if Mugabe passed a law and then had a department to implement it. He lost in 2000 a referendum. And after this referendum, the war veterans simply went onto farms, chucked out the owners, without a law being in place or even a change to the constitution to allow for it. And Mugabe had a very simple option. Either he could have estranged himself from the war veterans, which is his primary support base, or he could have opted to ride the tiger. And this is what he did. He only changed the constitution in 2005, 5 years later on. And that is a risk for us. Land grabs by undisciplined groups of people is a real risk, especially if the police does not have the capacity or the political will to do something about it. But it's not the only examples. There's a case currently in court where in Heidelberg, in Gauteng, a building has been expropriated without any compensation, which was rented by the Department of Health. And they stopped paying their rent. And then the owner of this building chucked them out. He started the legal process to throw them out. And then they simply expropriated him. And this owner is Plaaswerf Beleggings. It is currently in court. And it's been in court now for the last 4 years. But the can is simply kicked down the road all the time, with the state postponing and postponing the case. But then there's also the Achilles heel of this argument. The big name which angers everybody on the other side of the table in this debate. The name you do not dare say, Akkerland. Akkerland was expropriated in 2018 at more or less 25% of its market value. And in this case, we have every element which scares us in the new act. It is the best possible example on why we should fear this new act and why it is a terrible thing that is happening in South Africa. All the elements are there. And if I can remind you, Gerhard, this came from a decision at the ANC's Nasrec conference in December 2017, where Ramaphosa won the vote against Nkosazana Zuma. At that conference, the ANC adopted a resolution to change the constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation, which is not the same as this law of general application which was signed off now. It's something different. This is a law of general application, and that one was for changing the constitution. And since then, that motion in Parliament has been fended off because it could not win the required 2/3 majority of the vote in Parliament. But already at that conference, 3 ministers in the ANC and another ANC leader referred to a list of properties to be expropriated. 196 of them.
Is that list a rumor or a fact to you?
At the time it was a rumor, hey? At the time it was a rumor, but it made farmers very anxious. What if my name is on that list? Since then, during January, February, March 2018, 4 more ministers referred to this list. The next thing, AfriForum leaked a list, claiming this is it. And then the ANC was very quick to deny that this is the authentic list. They said this is false. Then the Institute of Race Relations said, but they also got this list from a whistleblower, and they can confirm that it is the real list. The next thing, one of the biggest networks of farmers had a press conference in which they lashed out at AfriForum, claiming that there were a number of farms on that list which were the subject of a transaction, and that the buyers are now cancelling the transactions because the farms are on that list, and that they would hold AfriForum responsible for these cancelled transactions. In Agri Limpopo, we had a meeting on it the very next day, and we questioned the morality of passing on such a transaction on a unsuspected buyer We said, don't be angry with the one who leaked the list, be angry with the one who compiled the list. But the next thing, number one on that list of AfriForum, the farm Akkerland, on the northern side of the Zoutpansberg in Limpopo, was actually expropriated. On the day before Good Friday.
So first the list appear, and later on the farm was confirming the priorities on the list, so to speak, yeah.
Now, on the day before Good Friday, on that Thursday afternoon, the owners, Johan Steenkamp and Andre Kloete, they received the notice for expropriation. Now, you know,
how does such a notice arrive?
by hand.
Somebody knock on your door, stand at your gate and say, here's something.
Yes, because you are no longer the owner at the moment when you get your letter. It was also said to them that they had only 7 days.
But how does it work to you? Does it mean, here's your notice, you, from this moment onward, you're no longer the owner?
Yeah.
And you've got how much time? In this case, they had a couple of days.
They had 7 days.
And the thing was delivered to them, if I can remember correctly, just before a long weekend or something.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
So 4 of the 7 days were holidays.
Yeah.
But then, over the long weekend, we got a judge to hear an urgent application, and we got some leeway. The family could stay on the farm until such time the merit of the case was heard, but we had a limited time to file that case.
How long?
I think it was 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And to file the case, we needed the money. And we did not have it in Agri Limpopo, neither did those families have it. So we went to the mother body to ask for assistance, and they said, no, we are not going to help you with this case. And then we went to banks, and they would not help us. And eventually we went to AfriForum and Solidarity, and they helped us. So we could file this case, and the case was heard, or was placed for the 12th of September. But on that day, we got to an agreement, or the owners got to an agreement with the state, whereby the state withdrew the notice. Also, there was a cost order against both the minister and the Land Claims Commissioner. But there was also an order that the ownership must revert to these families immediately. And then, remember, the offer here was, if I remember well, about 20 million rand for the farm. Now, soon afterwards, towards the end of 2018...
So there was allegedly a period of consultation, discussion, negotiation with the farmers. They offered 20 million. Farmers said, no, the farm is worth much more. And then they expropriated.
Yes.
Okay, right.
Which is important in terms of the new act.
Yeah.
Because the new act says there must be negotiations. And if you cannot find each other, the state can expropriate. So in this case, it's exactly what happened. He was offered 20 million. He refused it. They expropriated at 20 million. So what kind of negotiations or agreement is that? How do you negotiate with a gun against your head? And then he had to find the money to fight this. And after the ownership was reverted to the owner again, he sold it on the open market for 80 million. Now, of course, News 24 says this shows that the system works. It's exactly our point. Under the new act, we would not have won this case.
Because?
Because the new act allows for all these discounts which the Constitution also referred to, because you can get to nil compensation now. Under the previous act, it was not possible, because it specifies now exactly how this process should look like. Under the previous act, it was not possible. This is why they had to settle out of court. But with the new act, we would definitely have lost this case.
So the owners of Akkerland would have been in a much poorer situation at the current, in terms of the current dispensation.
For sure. This is why we say Akkerland shows exactly what is wrong with the new act. And the most interesting thing is, all those who now say you have nothing to fear, the individual will not carry the burden for a national imperative. It will not come down onto the shoulders of an individual farm owner. When it really happened, they were nowhere to be seen. They made no contribution to his case. He was absolutely delivered. Was it not that some of the colleagues in Limpopo, the other farmers, that AfriForum and Solidarity came to the table and said, let's support you, let's help you, because if you lose your case, we are all under a bigger risk. This case would not have happened.
So they fixed that problem.
They fixed their problem. It's now much easier.
They fixed their problem. Yeah. Do you know, there was a list, there was that expropriation took place, or the attempt. Just in terms of the current dispensation, if you look at how it works, any expropriating, any organ of state, I think that's what the act says, can initiate this expropriation. I think that's what it's called, organ of state. Is it right?
Expropriating authority.
Expropriating authority. Now, one would think that's a type of decision that must be taken at a very, very high level. Now, I must before we get there, I must interrupt myself, and we will have to get to that. The act, I mean, there's a lot of things that must happen before you can do that. It's not just somebody wakes up one morning and say, I'm going to do that. Let's just make that clear. If you look at sorry for this now, I'm paging through the act here. Certain things need to happen. There need to be only certain land qualifies for this. And I want you to deal with it, Section 12.3 of the Act. And there must be all types of land that is. So I just want to make clear, there must be no misinformation. It's not that a official wake up one morning and decides that he wants to expropriate your land. That's not that simple. But it's also it opens the gate somewhat, and I want you to deal with that. But there are certain conditions and then a process, and we'll get to that. So then I ask you the question, I understand there's conditions and a certain process that need to be followed. But who can expropriate? We can make that decision.
These organizations, organized business, organized agribusiness, organized agriculture, who say there's nothing to fear about this act. There are enough checks and balances, and that the individual property owner's interest is actually covered by this prescribed processes. They claim three things. They claim that all countries have an expropriation act. It is necessary for the state to be able to expropriate, so this is nothing special. Then they claim, like you have said just now, it's not that easy. You need to go through these processes, and the process is you need to be notified that there's the intention to expropriate you, and then you need to enter into negotiations, and there needs to be an offer, and if you cannot find each other on what the state says they believe is fair compensation or equitable compensation, then only can they expropriate? And then you can still take the matter to this special land court. Now, this is a false argument because, first of all, in the rest of the world, all over the world where we have thriving economies, the state can expropriate for a public purpose, such as building a road, expanding a town or township, building a school. This act also provides for expropriation for public interest, such as land reform, BEE, redistribution of wealth. All these political elements. Then, elsewhere in the world, it's usually a national department and a division in that who are specialists on forced acquisitions. Here, the act is very clear that there's wide powers to expropriate on a national level through various departments. Apart from that, the second tier of government, the provincial governments and their departments, can also expropriate in terms of this act and all the conditions set out in this act. That's not enough. The same powers are afforded to third tier of government, municipalities. They can also expropriate under all the conditions of this act. So,
And it doesn't stop there. If I read this thing, it goes beyond local authority. It says any other functionary. Now that is a person.
yeah,
Am I right?
exactly.
A functionary is a person
Exactly.
or a functionary or institution exercising a power or performing a function. Now he is also limited to certain things in the act. But can you imagine you leave that to a person?
Now, the same organizations who are saying we have nothing to fear, they are very quick in all their comments on it to say that it will always happen within the ambit of the Constitution. Ultimately, the Constitution is there to protect us. But this is also not true. Because we can get hurt, we can get mimed within the ambit of the Constitution. The Constitution does not guarantee market-related compensation. It does not. Article 25.3 in the Constitution specifies certain discounts. And it says, the state can look at market-related value, but also consider the current use of the property, the historical use of the property, the history of acquisition, the state's historical investment on this property. So, for example, if the Agricultural Credit Board made a subsidy available in the middle 1950s for fencing of farms or drilling boreholes, they want to argue that they cannot buy the same thing twice. They've already paid for that borehole, and they want to calculate the value of it in today's terms and then deduct it from market value. But the most dangerous part is also they can take a discount for the purpose of the expropriation. For example, in the case of Akkerland, the purpose was for a land claim. Now, the big issue with that is the Constitution does not say how much. Can you deduct 5% for it, or 15%, or 50%, or 80%? That needs to be established through court authority, court case after court case. The judges will, over time, through various court cases, give content to these vaguenesses. The single biggest issue, the thing which has rung all the bells in the USA and elsewhere in the world, is this question: in which kind of democracy do you bring the burden of national interests, such as land reform or redistribution of wealth, down to the shoulders of an individual landowner. And who would decide which individuals? It opens the gate so wide for abuse, for punishment of people who do not politically agree with you, especially when you boil it down to the local level. Now, Gerhard, we now have a government of national unity. We don't know whether it will last for the full 5 years. In 2027, at the end of 2027, there will be a new policy conference of the ANC, and there will be a new leader of the ANC. And it might well be those who are standing in line right now in the second or third positions. And after that, it's game on. Then we are in the whitewater towards the next elections. What will keep any of the radical politicians, especially on a local level, to test the limits of this act, to show the poor, uneducated, deep rural constituencies the voting fodder, to show them we are prepared to take stuff from people and give it to you?
I just want to ask you this, to those that says that the Constitution protects us. If you call on the Constitution to protect you, then you must be prepared to eventually go and present your case in the Constitutional Court, because that's the ultimate place where you present that argument. How do you get there if you no longer have your property? If you lost it, it's already expropriated. You no longer have the income from that property. And that is one of the dilemmas in this thing. It's not as if the state's threatening you to expropriate. You are in court, you lose perhaps, you go to the next level, to a higher court. This thing says no, you are expropriated. Now you're on your own. Where do you get funding? Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, you fight with your own funding, and the state or the municipality fight you with taxpayers' money, also with your own money.
And your own money.
And there's no risk on the official who was the aggressor. If he loses, so what? But then, let's say you get to that level. Let's say you get to the Constitutional Court. You'll most probably not win, because the Constitution allows for discounts to be taken. Hence, our position as SAAI, taking care of the interest of our family farmers. We say, although the Constitution does not guarantee market-related compensation, it does also not prohibit it either. Why not just pay the landowner what is due to them? Why not bring the certainty for investors that you will never run the risk of losing your investment if your number comes up for expropriation? And why not spread the responsibility to pay for national imperatives across the whole fiscus? Why not let society pay for it and not the individual?
If somebody says to you, if I was representing the state here, I would have said, but we just don't have the money. I mean, we don't have money to fix a pothole. Where do you expect me to get the money to buy a farm?
And then you have the suspicion that I have that money.
Yeah, but the point is, the answer to that guy making that statement, say, you won't, can you imagine the money flowing into the country if you bring certainty?
Yeah.
If you bring, who wants to buy a farm with that cloud hanging over your head? So it is pushing down prices. It is creating that uncertainty. And there's I mean, the moment you start doing doing it, the investment, the flow of investment will stop.
You have no
So
idea.
you lose. You think you lose money if you pay for the farm. You have got no idea how much you will lose if you do this.
You have no idea how many property transactions have been cancelled in the last week, and we get farmers who are calling us from all over the country. How many nurseries are calling to say all our tree bookings have been cancelled. Well, who will now plant a tree from which you will only harvest in 6 or 7 years from now, not knowing that you will be compensated for all your expenses if you get expropriated?
Mm. Gio, let's just go to the conditions for expropriation. They've tried to. I want to confront you with this. This must be for public interest. That's what they say. The land's not being used to generate income or to develop the land for the benefit in other words, somebody that has bought a farm for investment, let them lie, invest it in. Now, I don't know. There might be people that buy a farm and just leave it there. There might be.
Oh, yes.
But they said, no, then we'll take your farm.
What about the private reserves where nature is kept in its pristinest original form? Is it utilized or not? 21% of our land surface and the commercial farmland is utilized as game farms. Not all of it as hunting farms. Is it utilized? What about those farmers who are on a rotation? If you plant tomatoes, for example, you cannot plant it year in and year out on
Your land
the
must
same
rest.
land.
Your
It
land
must
must
rest. Is it then not utilized? Who will decide on that?
Some official somewhere. Or maybe a judge later on. And if that judge is hostile, you're in trouble.
And in the new land court that is planned, you can imagine which judges will be deployed to that court. The real danger is, remember, this court has different rules. They can also rely on hearsay evidence, and then the act provides for assistance to this judge, which are not lawyers or who are not judges. So you'll probably have a few land activists also assisting the judge to come to a certain conclusion.
And relying on the evidence of a person making allegations on his predecessors, they were here, whatever the case may be, and that's allowed. Sure. Anything else you want to say on this thing? I just before we move on, I mean, you're a very prominent person in the farming community, and you make very wide input, and you make very thorough input, and because of your position, the Minister of Agriculture sort of distanced himself from you. Am I allowed to touch on this, or must I just leave it there?
Of course, you're allowed. There are no holy cows here.
Yeah. He walks away. He says, "No, I don't. I know you, but you're not making any valuable input. Just talk about it." I mean, I think to you it somewhere was a bit of an embarrassment. Do you want to address this?
Of course it was. And we got too many negative reactions to that from members and from partners that I care to try to count. Even some of our sponsors called about it. I'm in trouble with some organizations where I hold positions as chairman of a board or a board member, for whom it's important that there's a good relationship between myself and the minister. Now, the heading of an article in News 24 was that Minister Steenhuisen said, I'm not his advisor. Now, I am not his advisor, he's right. But then it says that he's distancing himself from me. Now, immediately after that, I got a WhatsApp from the minister saying this is not true. This is not what I said. And then also last night, I got a new one saying this is really not true. This is not what I said. But he did not set the record straight in public. And I don't know why, and I cannot speak on his behalf. But also in the questions which News 24 posted to the minister and which gave them the material on which they wrote this particular article, they informed the minister that SAAI is affiliated to AfriForum, which is not true. They tell the minister that I am one of those spreading the false news that there are widespread land grabs in the country. I've never said that. They say that SAAI is a very small organization representing a small number of farmers, and then the big organization is one of the others, without giving the data. So Media 24 very clearly is not a reporter of news. They have a very, very specific agenda. In the article prior to this one, on 6th of February, they said even in the heading that Akkerland was never expropriated. It was sold. And then through the process in the Media Ombudsman, they actually had to concede that there was an expropriation before the selling of Akkerland. In this particular
This thing
one,
with the Media Ombudsman, how old is this?
well, it is still in the process at the moment.
But
We are still exchanging
okay, but
papers.
if they conceded in the exchange
Already in the papers in which they filed, from the answers they gave, they conceded that it was expropriated. And in this article which you are referring to now, the one of the 13th of February, you'll read there in the second last paragraph that they say that Akkerland actually is evidence that the system works, that the law still works, and that it protects us against unjust expropriation. Now, Gerhard, that is exactly our argument. Through the experience of the expropriation of Akkerland under the previous act,
it did work.
It did work. And now they changed
but
the
it's
act.
no longer available.
Yeah.
What
If we
would
took
you
that
add?
matter to court now, we will probably have lost it.
Yeah. So I think let's just leave that here. If the thing with the minister, I think you've said it, and is welcome to respond to that. The issue of AGOA, and the issue that's currently playing out. If I was sitting here as a representative of the United States, and I say to you too, I heard messages that there's certain things happening, but I must tell you that whatever you're going to tell me now will have an impact on AGOA. Will you say, no, well, let's keep AGOA, and all the other stuff that's happening in terms of land, that's not that serious. And then may be a repeat of what's already been said here. But I'm putting it to you, if you say, Theo, remember, there's AGOA, there's some of your members, there's wine, there's wine industry, there's citrus, there's the motor industry, there's AGOA, and there's what is in the Act. And so here you said, what are you going to say?
You're asking me what many of our members are confronting us with on a daily basis. Would I rather have AGOA without a farm or a farm without AGOA? If the USA would kick us out of AGOA, it would be devastating. We would lose a lot of jobs. We would lose the livelihoods of many, many farmers. It will have an impact on the feasibility of many small towns. It will be very sad news. Hence, the efforts inter alia of organizations such as AfriForum, who say, please don't punish the population of South Africa if you have a scrap with the ANC. Personally, I will go to lengths to try to convince the Trump administration not to kick us out of AGOA. But then, we cannot act as if this Expropriation Act is nothing. That it will not have a more devastating impact on investment, on growth, on jobs. There was something dishonest in signing off on this act because it was already signed off before Christmas. Nobody knew about it. It was only announced the day after the South African delegations returned from Davos. But in Davos, that delegation, Government of National Unity delegation, said, South Africa is open for business. Bring your money here. Come and invest.
They said that.
They said it. But they did not say,
We've already signed
signed an act which puts your investment in danger. And remember, it is not only land. You can be expropriated from your shares in a company. You can be expropriated from your bank account. You can be expropriated from your intellectual property. The act is not limited to land only. And it can be done in a public interest, not only for a public purpose. So for a political means. And this is what makes it so dangerous. And this is why no one dares. And as farmers, we are angry with organizations claiming to be the voice of farmers and agribusinesses who say there's nothing to fear. And we are particularly angry with the banks. Because each one of us have a farm, some of them 2 or maybe 3 to lose. But the banks have all our farms to lose. All of us put our farms up as collateral, as security, to borrow money from the banks for inputs every year. So even if they do not expropriate us at nil compensation, or 20%, 25% like with Akkerland, even if they expropriate us at 60% of the value, the implication would be that the bank and the koöperasie will get their money we owe to them, but the farmer will walk out naked. Why are the banks so quiet about this? Have you read or seen anything from them? And that makes farmers asking all the difficult questions. Is there a deal? What risk do they carry? How will it impact on the gearing of future loans from the banks? Will they also calculate that? Already, you are very lucky if you can borrow at 50%, 45% of the value of your farm? Will it even reduce that gearing too? Will we have less access to financing which is based on land as collateral? Will the risk be shared? So if I'm expropriated at 30% of the market value of my farm, will it mean that I only get 30% of what remains and the bank will only get 30% of what I owe them and the cooperative will get only 30% of what's owed to him? Is that risk spread equally, or is it only the farmer, the landowner, that will bear the burden of these national responsibilities?
Can you imagine you end up in a fight with a bank over that 30%?
Yeah, what if that 30% is not enough to pay my debt? Will I still be owing the bank the rest?
That is true.
And these are the questions no one cared to answer. Why aren't those in organized business who are so vocal now that we have nothing to fear, why don't they unpack the nuts and the bolts of these? Why are they shying away from that?
A question I would have asked somebody from other agricultural organizations here today, they say they are firmly opposed to the act. But in the meantime, they say don't make too much of a fuss of this. Can you explain? Why do you think is that? What part of it are they opposed to? And what is not a problem?
I really cannot explain that. No, I can't. They say that we need to keep a close eye on how this thing unfolds. We will see how the courts deal with it, but then it's too late. You know, we need to oppose this act right now. On the first priority, first price will be if we could withdraw.
Yeah.
There are these three things which really have the kind of teeth that can tear us apart. And the first is the wide powers given to all three tiers of government. Secondly, that this discount clauses are open for interpretation. There's no certainty as to who can take what kind of discount and how will you calculate it, what will be the mathematics behind this. And then, of course, the fact that you can also expropriate in national interest and not only for a national purpose.
Joe, thank you. I just want to mention the thing. One of the things that's been said in this report, I think where it was reported, I think it is Sunday Times mentioned. One of the agricultural organizations says there's no land seizures, no conferences, blah blah blah, and they say, of course. And the issue of and to link farm murders to the genocide of white farmers is bizarre. That is not true. Of course, we have farm murders. Now, people say, the issue of farm murders is not such a big issue. I mean, there are 70 people in South Africa murdered every day, and one or two of them might be a farmer. What makes a farm murder then different?
Yeah, it's not as if there's a farmer murdered every day. On average, over the last 20, 22 years, it was more or less a farm murder every fifth day.
Yeah.
And a farm attack more or less every second day. And there are constituencies in society in South Africa where you even have more murders, like violence against women and children, like in gang violence, especially in the Cape Flats and the Western Cape. But the big difference here, no one calls for murders against women and children. No one sings songs, kill a gangster, or kill children in crossfire in gang wars. No one asks for this. Like you have political groupings who call for farmers to be murdered. Then when it happens, it is not accompanied by the same level of brutality and torture. They don't drill holes into the kneecaps of an Oma. It is only on farms where you have this really out of the framework kind of brutality. And then afterwards, you do not have all these Twitterati applauding it, saying, well done, we need more of it, without any consequence whatsoever. And that makes farm murders different. And this is why farmers are so extremely angry when the president in 2018 said at the General Assembly of the United Nations, there's no such a thing as farm murders. But he's not been to the scene where a father or a mother was murdered. He did not smell the blood there. He did not step out of that kitchen where it happened to face the children and answer their questions. I would love these politicians who are so cash on their comments on farm murders to accompany us to those scenes. Let them experience it. And then I want to hear them saying it's not an issue in South Africa.
What is the reason for the fact that these things people had this call of kill a boer, kill a farmer, and that's not the specific one, but there was very recently public calls for murder, but nobody acts upon it. It is just
there's no consequences.
There's no consequence, absolutely no consequences. What does it say? What does it mean? Does it give the message to somebody, I can kill and get away with it?
From what we hear in our engagements with farmers' organizations in the USA and even the journalists who call to write articles or where we take part in panel discussions on television, they say to us, this is why the Trump administration is rocking the boat. This is why there are all these difficult questions being posed to your government. Most certainly, there's very little more you can do in South Africa. I don't think so. I think much more can be done. I think especially under the government of national unity, and given that we have some strong new kids on the block when it comes to chairmen of portfolio committees in Parliament and ministers and deputy ministers, I think now that the ANC does not have the outright majority, it might be easier to say, let's do something about it. Let's start off by doing a proper data analysis. Where does this phenomenon come from? Why is it happening? Who are these farm murderers? Is it like everybody wants to say on Twitter, Zimbabweans and Mozambicans and Somalis? Is it because of illegal laborers being employed by farmers? Who are they? It's not that difficult to establish, especially from those who have been charged and sentenced. Secondly, what can we do to prevent it? How can we pool resources across departmental boundaries? How can we ensure that there's enough cooperation between intelligence, the various divisions of the police and the army to bring down these numbers? At least there must be a gesture that our government is serious to bring down these numbers. And until that happens, as representatives of farmers, we owe it to our constituency to be as vocal as possible to point out that we really have a problem.
Another thing that caused a stir in South Africa is President Trump's invitation for Afrikaners to come to the United States. That is quite a big issue, and I want you to respond to that.
The moment he said that same morning, I wrote an open letter, which we have since learned that it has reached his eyes, in which I said this is not only a black and white thing. He would make a mistake if he looks at our problems here in South Africa as a black and white thing. Because we have members in SAAI who are black family farmers, who struggle even more than white farmers. Let me tell you, I want to see the white farmer who can make a success out of the conditions or from the conditions under which we expect black farmers to become profitable and thrive. It's nearly impossible because they don't own their land and because they do not have access to financing. They don't have the collateral. Their support by government is appalling. We actually deliver them to failure. But then, we also organize the students on our campuses in SAAI. The students' organizations are all linked to SAAI. But we also try to organize those youngsters who leave every year to go and work on farms in the USA and also elsewhere in Europe and in the UK. This year, of what we know, and we don't know of all of them, of what we know, some 16,200 youngsters will go to work on farms in the USA. They come back with a lot of experience on magnificent machines with state-of-the-art digital technologies. They come empowered with new knowledge, but they also come with some dollars in their pockets from which they can launch their careers. If they had those opportunities here, they would not have gone. They don't have those opportunities here. Of course, some of them will grab such an offer to stay behind in the USA. And who are me or you or whoever for that matter to say you're not allowed to utilize these opportunities? They will do so in any way. So in SAAI, different to other rights-driven organizations, we did not say thank you, but no thank you. And I want to quote you 3 examples of people who we actively try to assist to use this opportunity. There's this one farmer who lost both his mother and his daughter in a farm attack. And AfriForum was kind enough to assist us with counseling. But the counseling did not have the results we hoped for. And after a little more than a year, the counselor said to us, there's damage here. There's psychological damage. And then the unimaginable happened, and he suffered a second farm attack in which he lost his wife. And now this guy says, I don't want to be here anymore. You must help me to find a new livelihood. Who will say to them, vasbyt ou maat, bly hier? We cannot. We cannot. There's this guy who lives in Harare, I know him well, who said he farmed with his father for 3 or 4 years before they lost their land in Zimbabwe. He's Afrikaans-speaking Zimbabwean, and he wants us to try to influence the US government to extend this invitation to them too. He said, when we lost our land, I was 25 years old. Now I am 50. A whole generation has gone by. I've spent a lifetime waiting to be compensated. But I think I still have 15 or 20 years of farming in me. If only I had this opportunity, I would have grabbed it with both hands. Is there a chance of me also benefiting from this invitation? Then there are these young people. There are many of them who say, My father sold the land in land claims, or we no longer have the family farm, and what we got for it was barely enough to pay our debt, not enough to really carry my parents through their retirement years. Where do I go to get financing to start a career in farming? The barriers to entry in this profession is so high. For black children, black young people, it is not much lower, but at least there are a few mechanisms for them to get into the industry. Blended financing through IDC or Land Bank, the proactive land acquisition strategy, where they favor women, previously at disadvantaged groups, youngsters. But for a white youngster, where would you send him today to get a loan to start a business? I don't know where to. So can you tell them not to utilize these opportunities? Hence, I know we got very unpopular by doing so, but we decided not to close that door. But having said that, I fully concur with Minister Steenhuisen in his declaration earlier this morning when he said, every farmer and every potential farmer who decides to go is a big loss to us. Yeah. We don't want them to go. What we want is a policy environment which makes it easy for the brightest young minds to choose agriculture as a career, irrespective of their cultural, racial, religious backgrounds. We need a policy environment in which we can not only recruit more youngsters into this profession, but we need to maintain our competitiveness. We need to make sure that the strongest young people see a future when they choose to be farmers.
Stu, once again, thank you very much, and for this today, and thank you for your role in South Africa. I speak on behalf of South Africans and say to you, we really, sincerely appreciate you. Thanks to you.
Thank you, Gerhard. Thank you for inviting me back.